Today in this video, I want to clarify one or two things about the mixture preachers. These preachers, many of whom went to theological schools, seminaries, or what have you. Others grew up from the pastors they have been under. These categories of preachers oftentimes are self-acclaimed bishops, apostles, prophets, pastors, or what have you. I'll give you two quick scenarios. In one scenario, I attended one of these churches, very charismatic. We had a Bible study on a Wednesday, and there was this subject of salvation that came up. And the elders in the church, presented this, presented that. And it came to a place where one of the elders said, "You can lose your salvation." At this point, I thought I should inject. And when I got up, I told them, once saved, always saved. And I explained, salvation is a person. It's Jesus Christ. Once Christ enters you, once you give birth, my beloved children in whom I travail, till Christ is formed in you. You cannot lose that child. That child is the Son of God. Make a long story short, there was just argument and the entire congregation on one side and I was on one side. At the end of the day, we disagreed to agree. I came home, prayed that night, and I was in a dream. And in the dream, this same event repeated itself. Except this time, the pastor and everybody again were on one side. I had some keys, two keys in my hand. And while this argument was going on, the two keys dropped from my hand and fell on the floor inside the church. And when I could not argue any longer in the dream, I picked up the keys and I said, "I'm out of here." That was how I left that church. You see, the Lord made me understand that He gave me the keys of the kingdom to share with the congregation in that Wednesday discussion. But they will not receive it. Here's another scenario. In one other church I attended a while back, guest speakers were invited. A bishop was invited to speak. The day before the bishop came, she was in a dream. And in the dream, the Lord took her and visited churches all over. When they visited a church, they would hear so much noise from a distance. There was this noise just coming out from the churches. But when they got inside the church, nobody. There were no members. And this was the night before she was to speak as a guest speaker in the church that I attended. My mother in the Lord in that church was very charismatic, loved God with all her heart, soul, spirit, and mind. But she always preached sin, sin, sin. These preachers, I call them Moses' preachers. They are like Moses, who took 600,000 out of Egypt, and every one of them perished in the wilderness minus two. They are also an organization. It's merely an extension of the Orthodox Church, except the Orthodox Church has an organization with a head office, with bodies that appoint pastors. But in this case, it's a charismatic church, has branches all over, but with a GO, a general overseer who oversees all the churches. Paul says of this church, they have a zeal for the Lord, but without knowledge. Jesus speaks of this set of churches as either being hard or cold. They are hard for the law of Moses, but cold when it comes to grace. They say things like, if I be a man of God, if I be a woman of God. They get dreams, prophetic dreams, but will not look for salvation inside the dream. And they will speak to persons. They use intimidation to intimidate their members. They say things like, you can lose your salvation. If you don't pay tithe, you will not go to heaven. I had a scenario where in the place I work, it's a school. And in the dream, the Lord made me understand that there was a pastor there who was not identifying himself. Make a long story short, the following day in the morning, I went to work, and as I was going down the hallway, I saw this other teacher coming. And I approached him and I said, I had a dream last night. There's a pastor in this building, but he's not identifying himself. He shook. He was taken aback. He said, I'm a pastor. I said, oh, really? Long story short, he invited me to his church. The following Sunday, I went. While I was in the church, he was preaching. He has his pictures everywhere. Prophet this, prophet that. And he started reminding the congregation of the word he gave the previous Sunday. How that he saw an earthquake and that many people died. And the following Sunday, the earthquake had occurred in a city in Los Angeles or California, somewhere thereabout. See, this is the methodology that is used. If you don't tithe, you will not go to heaven. You can lose your salvation. If you want to marry, some of them go to the extent of, if you're marrying, you have to marry within the organization, not outside the organization. Am I communicating to you? They use the law of Moses, the law of commandments, which is detrimental to their followers. Because the law, watch this, is man. The law is the strength of sin. Sin is man. God made him who knew no sin to be sin for us. How did Jesus become sin? How did God become sin? By becoming a man. And so many of their followers have this perception because of their lifestyle, the flamboyant, glamorous lifestyle. God is with them. Because of their prophecies of doom that oftentimes comes to pass, forgetting that when Elijah prophesied, if I be a man of God, let fire come down from heaven, that prophecy was not from God, but was an angel. They have ministering spirits that follow them, and they are angels. And Paul spoke of this in Galatians chapter 1, I think from verse 6, 7, 8. If I or any other, maybe even an angel, come to preach any other gospel, and any other gospel is the Old Testament, the gospel of the law of Moses. So, these are Orthodox preachers who went rogue, turned charismatics, GOs who control branches, doctrines emphasized in the law of Moses. They are hot for the law and cold for grace because they have little knowledge about the message of grace and truth. 600,000. Every one of them perished in the wilderness. The Orthodox churches have followers. Mixture preachers have followers. I hope I've communicated to you. Stay blessed till we meet again. In the next segment, I will look at the doctrinal teachers. And I will expatiate briefly on that too. Thank you and God bless.